Hey, thanks for joining me. I just did a review on the Pecron E1000LFP, and this is the kind of bigger brother to that. This is the E2400LFP. And this is a 2048 watt-hour capacity power station. And the 2400 part means that it's got an AC inverter, pure sine wave AC inverter, capable of sustaining a continuous 2400 watts of AC output. And I think it has a peak surge rating of 4000 watts. Just to talk about what it's got in the box, let's just quickly open up this case. This is kind of a semi-rigid case. So one of the nicer cable bags that I've seen, or cable cases that I've seen. Then you've got the typical kind of warranty card user guide that you normally would expect from Pecron, just like all the other ones. Now in terms of cables, we've got a solar cable here, MC4 to this GX style. This is a 5-pin kind of an aviation style connector. This is what they typically, or what I have typically seen on some of the other larger Pecrons, starting with around the 2000 series that came out a couple of years ago. And since then, I thought they had moved to an XT60 input connector, but apparently I'm wrong because they are still using this 5-pin GX style. So you don't want to lose this cable. I'm sure you can order another one if you need to, but this is not a super common connector here for the solar input on the side here. And by the way, this is up to 700 watts on this this GX style connector here, and that is a voltage range of 32 volts up to 95 volts. So be aware of that. You really need, if you want to take advantage of that 700 watts, you got to generate at least 32 volts into this port to really get into this, to activate the larger of the two solar charge controllers. Now there's a second charge controller that'll do 12 up to 18 volts. And I read the manual, and even though it says on the label here 12 to 18 volts, the manual actually says don't exceed 25 volts. So instead of a 95 volt cap over here on the GX style, the DC, I think it's a 5521 connector, has a max of 25 volts. But this one will only get you up to 100 watts max. So just be aware of that. They've obviously got an integrated charger on this with a large AC cable. You've got a car charging DC 5521. So this will go into that 100 watt port since this can handle a max of 10 amps anyway. And then it interestingly comes with a set of alligator clips to a XT60 cable. Now this is good not for jump starting a car because it doesn't have a jump starting circuit. This is just a, I'm sure this is just a fuse right here on the positive side. So it does not allow you to jump a car with this, but it does allow you to use the 30 amp DC output over here in order to fairly quickly add charge to another battery. So if you needed to connect this to another battery, you've got a 12 volt up to 30 amp DC output over here, which is pretty nice. And you can just use this to power a DC system in an RV or a van as well. It's got your typical 12 volt 10 amp car socket over here. That's a DC 5525 accessory port. Then you got a couple PD100 type Cs and 4 quick charge 18 watt type A ports. You got 3 standard 3-prong AC outlets over here. That's about it for the front, really. On the side, you've got a battery expansion port, and this does allow you to use 2 of their EP 3000 48 volt expansion modules. That would give you a maximum. Each one of those has a 3000 watt hour capacity. So if you max this out with 2 of those expansions, you would get 8,192 watt hours total max. There's no wireless charging on top that I can see, and there's just vents on the side. So that's really about it on this unit. There's no area light and no wireless charging. And the other thing is that unlike the E1000, which as I mentioned is fairly unique, having a self-heating feature that allows you to charge the unit even in sub-freezing weather, this one does not. So this one is like the rest of the Pecron lineup, does not have self-heating. So you can discharge it all the way down to I think -4 degrees Fahrenheit, but you can only charge it when it's kept above freezing, so 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius or above, and then you can charge it. So no self-heating on this 2400 LFP. So just be aware of that. So let's get this thing on the bench, get it fully charged. Let's find out what kind of capacity we can get through the AC ports and the DC ports. We are going to do a load test as usual on the 2400 watt AC inverter. Make sure we can sustain that for at least 10 minutes or more. And then test and see if this will do wake and charge on solar. Kind of the usual stuff that I do. and we'll find out how well this thing stacks up to the rest of the Pecron lineup, which has so far fared pretty well. So, see you in just a couple seconds. All right, let's do an AC discharge test on this and find out what the usable capacity is out of that AC inverter. I've got the AC on right now, and it is fully charged. So let me go ahead and plug it in a load, and we're going to monitor it, count up the watt hours from here. Let's go ahead and fire that up, and we'll run it all the way to empty and see how many watt hours we actually get. All right, looks like our AC capacity test is done. Fully shut down. Let's just kind of check and see here what we're seeing on screen. We are down to 0%. Let me go ahead and plug this into an outlet so we can see how many watt hours we actually got. Wow, okay, so 1900 watt hours. That's out of a rated 2048, and that is a well above average, extremely good, almost 93%, so 92 point something percent of rated capacity. That is a very good number, and that says we have a very efficient AC inverter. I'm kind of interested to see what the no-load draw numbers actually turn out to be on this 2400 watt AC inverter. I'm guessing they're going to be pretty good, but we'll find out. All right, let's do a DC output capacity test here. So I've got the DC outputs turned on, and we are at 100%. And I've got this connected from the little car, 12 volt, 10 amp car socket here. I mean, I really wish my DC tester would allow me to pull 30 amps, because then I could use this port, and that would be pretty cool. But no, I'm stuck to the 12 volt, 10 amp port. And my tester, as you can see here, is reading 13.36 volts. I'm going to pull 10 amps, make sure I can pull the full 10 amps. Let's go ahead and start that and see if it allows me to pull that 10 amps. Okay, apparently no problem. All right, so we are pulling, that equates to about just under 140 watts. Let's check back when this thing is fully shut down, and we'll see how many watt hours my tester has logged. All right, our DC discharge capacity test is done. Let's take a look down here, and we are getting, let's see, 1,692 and change on the watt hours out of that rated 2024. So that is just a little over 83%. So that's a pretty average number out on this DC test over all the power stations that I test. So I often get that question, like, why am I getting a seemingly higher efficiency number for usable capacity out of the AC inverter than I do the DC? So the reasons for that are actually typically twofold. Number one, the DC test has to run a lot longer because I'm only pulling something like 130 watts. And but the larger reason is that that step down conversion from the system voltage of probably 48 volts in this case would be my best guess. And yeah, and you're having to step that down to 12 volts. So there is a loss when you do that. And that's what you're paying the price for there in terms of capacity. But again, in terms of relative performance to other units, 83.4% or whatever of usable rated capacity is actually pretty decent performance relative to the other power stations that I test. So I would say those numbers do stack up reasonably well. All right, well, we've got this E2400LFP. I actually started to recharge it briefly through AC. I was curious because it's right at freezing in here. I was curious if it would take a charge, and it did. I took it up to 2%. I'm going to go ahead and power it off. And then I'm going to see if this thing will wake and charge via solar. I don't have a lot of sun going on right now, and it is only mid-afternoon, so it's very cloudy. This has a, on the connector on the right, as I mentioned, it's got a 700 watt max, and more importantly, a 95 volt max, if you can make that out right there, 32 to 95 volts. So you need at least 32 volts to start charging on this port, and you should not exceed 95 volts. Now, I've got an 800 watt array out there that's 4 200 watt solar panels, and those have a voltage open circuit of 23 volts each, which, if I do the math on that, would get me up to about 92 volts. That's coming very close to 95 volts. So that's already a smaller margin than I'm comfortable with. And on top of that, because we have very cold temperatures, we are at right now about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to drop even more. But if we were to get a sudden burst of sunshine with these super cold temperatures, it's actually possible that we could exceed that 95 volts. So I'm not going to take a chance. Normally I would over panel that to 800 volts or 800 watts, and I would probably be getting something in the mid 80s on the voltage. But because of the extreme circumstances, I am not going to take that chance. So I have strung 3 of those 200 watt panels in series. So that gives me, and I just measured it to be sure, about 65 volts. So that's well within the range. So it's a 600 watt input. And I've got that coming in on this GX connector from the MC4s right off the solar panel. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. Let me just go ahead and turn on the AC output so that we can kind of parasitically drain whatever charge we get on this thing overnight. And we're going to come in the morning and we'll see if we are actually able to wake and charge without me having to unplug or replug or press any buttons or anything. So yeah, so let's check back in the morning and see how we do. And here are the sky conditions. I can see where the sun is at, and a moment ago it was sufficiently cloudy that I really couldn't when I was out here clearing off the ice. But now I can. And you can see we do have a little bit of blue peeking through in a couple spots, so we could get a momentary burst of sun. That's why I'm not going to take a chance with that 800 watt connection, because that could put it over the top and damage the charge controller. I don't want to do that.
The next day.
All right, next morning, about 9:30 a.m. Got some sun, so that's nice, but deceiving because it is brutal cold out right now. It's probably 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And I think we were in the negatives overnight. So I did put a heater on in my workshop here just so we wouldn't drop below freezing, hopefully. I already know it's charging because I use the app, and I have Wi-Fi out here now, and I can see from the app that it is charging, but let me show you what it's doing. We are right at 32 degrees in here. By brighten up the screen there, you can see we're already at 14%. Pulling in about 412 watts. So that's pretty doable. And even though I've got this thing nowhere near maxed out on solar, that 600 watts worth of solar that I have connected to it, as long as we get some reasonable sun today, should be more than enough to top this 2048 watt hour battery all the way off. And the good multiplier for that, if you haven't seen some of my earlier videos about this, but you can use 4.5 or 5 as a multiplier. So 6 times, say 4, let's go real conservative, say maybe we get some clouds today. So 6 times 4 would give me about 2,400 watts, or so to say 600 times 4, and about 2,400 watt hours of charge capacity that I could reasonably expect as long as I got decent sun conditions. A little more than that if I get very good sun conditions. So that's how I know we should be able to fully top this off, and the fact that we're already at 14% at 9:30 in the morning, it's a very good sign. So I'm gonna let this thing fully charge off, and then we're gonna do some load testing on this guy a little bit later today. All right, let's do some load testing on this E2400's 2400 watt continuous AC inverter. So I've got it currently running a load of about 1654. Let me kick that up to as close to 2400 as I can get it. I'm gonna see if it'll sustain that for 10 full minutes. This will get us to right at about 2400 watts. Let's start the timer. All right, 10 minutes, no problem. We were just shy of the continuous rated max of 2400. The volume, if you were watching my decibel meter here, kept right at just a hair under 60 decibels the whole time. It's not a complete white noise sound. It's got a little bit of a whir to it, but when it's running continuously, it really doesn't seem very intrusive to me. Definitely passes the load test. Let me see if we can push this and find out where it would actually shut off. All right, I've got it bumped up here. We're now running just slightly over at 2400 watts. Let me try bumping this up just a little bit. So we've got a little bit of headroom here, 2435. Let's see if I take it up maybe another 100 watts. Let's see what it does. All right, now we're at 2529. I would imagine we're going to get an overload at some point here soon. We're a full 120 watts over the rated continuous output. Some pretty good headroom on this. All right, I fast forwarded a bit. We've been doing this for just over a minute now, still going strong. Let me see what happens if I take it up another 100 watts. 26, 22. We're 200 plus watts overrated, still going strong. All right, I fast forwarded again. It's been just about another minute at 200 watts overrated. Well, we just got the overload. Took about 2 minutes running 200 watts over the rated 2400 watts. So we got 2600 watts plus out of this thing for almost 2 full minutes. That's extremely impressive overhead on this AC inverter. So again, definite pass on the load test. All right, let's do a check on the AC inverter and how much noise we get in that, and whether or not it might be suitable for battery-powered amplification like guitar amps or PA systems. This is an old Crate mini guitar amp with no noise suppression on it. In fact, it's even lacking a grounding pin if you've seen some of my previous videos where I use this for testing. And I've got it connected to grid power right now down here. So let's do a baseline, find out how noisy this is on grid power. So here we go. I'm going to put the mic up in front of it so we can get a good clear listen. All right, relatively clean, little pop at the beginning, very slight buzz off of the grid power. So let's find out how that sounds when we power it from the AC inverter on the E2400. All right, same test, here we go. So definitely noisier for these older style amps. And so I think maybe this is not the best use case for like ham radio operations or remote PAs or guitar amps and things like that, unless you're using a line conditioner to help clean up that AC output just a little bit. Probably not recommended for this kind of application, but if you're not doing this, I don't think you really care. Really not a big deal either way. All right, let's test the surge on this 2400 LFP by running some common power tools. So first we'll start with the Ryobi 10-inch table saw. Let me go ahead and plug that guy in, and let's find out if it will run. All right, I'm not going to test the drill press because if it passed the table saw, drill press is an obvious gimme. So let's try the compound miter saw. I do have it plugged in to the AC output. And this is just your typical, I guess you would call this the high end for Harbor Freight. But it's a Hercules compound miter saw. So let me just see how that works and whether or not it cuts us off. Okay, that one did cut us off. And we got an overload on the display. So 10-inch table saw is a pass, larger compound miter saw, not a pass. All right, let's try a 7 1/4-inch Ryobi circular saw. Definite pass. All right, and last but not least, let's try, this is an 8-gallon, 3-horsepower Craftsman shop vac, and we'll see if this thing can handle the startup of this guy. No problem. All right, let's test the UPS capability on this E2400. I've got my entire gaming system, monitors, speakers, CPU, and all that plugged in through here, and I have AC power coming in here, and if you look on the screen, it clearly does say UPS. So let's simulate a power outage by pulling my grid power from here and seeing if my game is interrupted. Here we go, 3, 2, 1. All right, no disruption. All right, now just for fun, let's see if it recovers when I restore grid power. Okay, I heard the relay. The game continues. So, once again, yes, definitely UPS mode confirmed on this E2400 LFP. Okay, so I did also test both the AC and DC outputs for no load draw, and I actually got pretty solid performance on that front as well. So if you leave the AC inverter on, it will consume approximately 15 watts continuous, or about 0.75% of the total capacity per hour. And if you were to leave the DC outputs on, you'd probably not even notice any losses. I actually had to run the DC no-load test for a full 24 hours before it even registered a 1% drop in the overall charge, which is pretty impressive. Now, really, the only two areas where I think there's anything at all that's left to be desired is that the inverter output does produce some noise, as you heard, that you would notice if you were powering a PA system or a guitar amp or some audio equipment like a ham radio, things like that. And then also there's the surge performance on this unit that is just a little bit lower than what you would typically expect from a 2400 watt inverter. Now it is rated for 4000 watts, but I suspect that any inrush current over about 30 amps is going to trip the overload protection, as we observed with my Hercules compound miter saw. But short of that surge limitation, I think the AC inverter in this unit will give you the full 2400 watts and then some, as we saw in the load testing. So I think when you factor in that it's got mobile app control, and it's got the typical options to vary the AC charging rate and control the auto shutdown settings, and it's got enough solar input capacity to fully recharge the unit in well under a full day of even partly sunny conditions, let alone pristine conditions. It's got that 30 amp DC XT60 output connector and the ability to expand the overall capacity on this unit up to 8 kilowatt hours, and a current sale price of just $809, which is well below that super competitive budget threshold of about 50 cents per watt hour. This E2400LFP is just, well, it's just kind of a lot of bang for the buck. And typically, Pecron does also give me a discount code that I can share with you that'll knock off another usually 5% or so from that sale price, which makes it an even more compelling deal. And per usual, I'll leave all that information down on the video description below for you if you do want to go check all that out. Now, I think that sale pricing is probably only good through, I think, February 5th. So now might be as good a time as any to take advantage of those pre-tariff prices. Oh, and if you'd like to know what other kinds of things that this unit can run and for how long, other than the stuff that I already showed you, I do have a Google spreadsheet that you can download and then key in that 2400 watt inverter and the 2048 watt hour battery capacity numbers, and then the spreadsheet will fill in the rest for you. But you do have to download your own copy in order to edit it. So keep that in mind before you try and send me a request for permissions to edit the public copy, because I will 100% ignore that request. Okay, I think that's a wrap. If you still have questions about the unit that I didn't answer for you, please leave those down in the comments below and I will do my best to try and respond. And hey, if you did find anything at all in the video helpful, please do me a small favor and consider clicking that like button for me. I'd very much appreciate that. I do truly appreciate you taking some of your time out to watch this video with me, and I do hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.